Welcome back. Glad to have you here. For 10,000 years, the galaxy believed it knew where humanity had begun. Beneath a dead world, that certainty was about to collapse. Let the story begin. Archivist Prime Quell Varun watched the human excavation machine descend toward the surface of Orison without permission. It fell through the violet atmosphere on 6 columns of blue flame, a blunt vessel of dark metal carrying 32 archaeologists, 80 engineers, and enough drilling equipment to disturb a continent. Beneath it stretched a plain of black glass 2,000 kilometers wide, unbroken except for a ring of stone pillars near the northern horizon. The pillars were why the Xenoarchive had come. The humans were why Quell Varun was angry. His narrow body stood rigid before the observation gallery of the archive vessel Immutable Record. Silver ceremonial plates covered his shoulders, each one engraved with the name of a civilization whose history he had personally authenticated. His species, the Athari, possessed 4 slender arms and skin patterned with lines that darkened whenever they experienced agitation. At that moment, every line across Quell Varun's face had turned nearly black. "Remove their landing authorization," he ordered. Sub-Archivist Meral Sen lowered her eyes toward the console. The authorization came from the Interstellar Survey Compact, Archivist Prime. It carries signatures from 19 member civilizations. The Xenoarchive predates the Compact by 6,000 years, Quell Varun replied. "We do not require permission to protect history from amateurs." Below them, the human vessel completed its descent. Dust moved across the black plain in expanding circles. The machine settled on 4 reinforced landing struts less than 8 kilometers from the pillars. Its hull bore the emblem of the Terran Institute for Deep Antiquity and the name Wayfarer's Lantern. Quell Varun studied the vessel with open contempt. Humanity had joined the interstellar community only 312 years earlier. They had arrived with crude fusion drives, fragmented languages, and a historical record full of missing centuries. Their oldest confirmed cities were less than 15,000 years old. Their first mechanical industry was younger still. They were energetic, certainly, adaptive, sometimes ingenious, but ancient they were not. The Xenoarchive had proven that fact beyond dispute. Its scholars had cataloged the remains of 471 spacefaring civilizations. They had reconstructed the migration of the Askar dynasties across 9 spiral arms. They had translated the death songs of the Veori, mapped the shattered territory of the First Concord, and preserved genetic samples from species that had vanished before Earth possessed multicellular life. Human history occupied 11 chambers in a secondary annex. Their official classification was Juvenile Industrial Civilization, Origin World Confirmed, No Precursor Continuity. Quell Varun had approved the classification himself. Now the humans had come to Orison because one of their survey probes had detected patterns beneath the glass. Patterns, Quell Varun thought bitterly, were not proof. Every young civilization wanted to believe it had once been greater. Every species dreamed of hidden ancestors, forgotten kingdoms, and noble bloodlines stretching backward into myth. Most eventually accepted the smaller truth. Humanity, apparently, required a personal demonstration. A communication request appeared on the gallery screen. "Director Elena Varga wishes to speak with you," Meral Sen reported. Quell Varun considered refusing. Then he extended one lower hand. "Display her." The screen filled with the image of a human woman in a gray expedition coat. Elena Varga was 58 standard years old, with dark hair streaked in white and a narrow scar crossing the bridge of her nose. Behind her, technicians moved through the Wayfarer's Lantern's command compartment, while lines of geological data climbed across translucent displays. "Archivist Prime," Varga said, "I understand you have concerns about our landing. You are preparing to excavate a protected archaeological location," Quell Varun replied. "Concern is an inadequate word. The Survey Compact designated Orison as an open research world. The Compact lacks authority over confirmed precursor sites. Then it is fortunate this has not been confirmed as one." Quell Varun's facial lines darkened further. "Your confidence is misplaced, Director." Varga glanced toward something outside the transmission frame. "Perhaps, but our orbital scans found a geometric void 9 kilometers beneath the northern plain. It is too regular to be geological. Many natural formations appear regular at insufficient resolution. We also detected refined iridium, aligned carbon lattices, and a repeating electromagnetic pulse. Contamination from later visitors. The pulse repeats every 87 seconds. Machines repeat. Ruins do not establish ownership. Varga leaned slightly closer to the camera. We found human mitochondrial markers in the dust, trapped beneath the glass. Silence spread through the observation gallery. Meryl Sen turned toward Kel Varun. The Archivist Prime remained motionless. "That is impossible," he said. "That is why we landed." The transmission ended a moment later. For the first time in 2,000 years, Kel Varun felt something he had once believed scholarship had trained out of him. Uncertainty. The Xenoarchive had not been created to discover history. Discovery belonged to explorers, excavators, and wandering scholars who spent their lives chasing broken inscriptions through dangerous systems. The archive's purpose was greater. It determined which discoveries were true. 24,000 years earlier, the civilizations of the inner spiral had nearly destroyed themselves over fabricated histories. Empires invented ancestral claims to conquered worlds. Religious orders manufactured relics. Species altered their own genetic records to justify dominion over neighbors. The Athari had ended the chaos by founding an institution above borders, governments, and belief. The Xenoarchive accepted nothing without converging evidence. A ruin required material dating, cultural context, genetic association, and independent verification. A claim required records. A legend required corroboration. Where evidence failed, certainty ended. The system had preserved peace for hundreds of generations. It had also created a doctrine among the Athari. History was not merely the past. History was territory. Whoever controlled the authenticated past controlled the limits of what civilizations believed possible. Human claims of an ancient stellar empire had appeared soon after first contact. Their folklore contained floods, celestial teachers, wars in heaven, chariots of fire, cities erased by light, and beings who descended from the stars. Similar myths existed on thousands of worlds. The Xenoarchive had classified them all as symbolic inventions produced by pre-industrial minds attempting to understand natural phenomena. When human scholars asked whether their myths could preserve distorted memories of an earlier spacefaring age, Kel Varun had answered publicly. No, the human fossil record showed continuous biological development on Earth. Their artifacts followed a clear progression from stone tools to metallurgy, combustion, electricity, atomic power, and orbital flight. No starships appeared between layers. No advanced alloys waited beneath ancient cities. No off-world colonies carried human remains older than the species' known ascent. The evidence was absolute. Humanity had never possessed an ancient empire. The claim entered the Xenoarchive as a formal conclusion. For 81 years, no one had challenged it. Then Orison began to pulse. Director Elena Varga stood inside the Wayfarer's Lantern's primary laboratory while Dr. Samuel Okafor examined the dust sample for the 12th time. The laboratory occupied the center of the expedition vessel, protected from radiation and contamination by 3 sealed hulls. A grain of material no larger than a human fingernail rested inside a magnetic field. The grain had been recovered by a probe that penetrated a natural fracture in the glass plane before the expedition arrived. Okafor's hands moved carefully across the analysis controls. "Tell me it changed," Varga said. "It changed," he replied. She exhaled, then he looked up. "Unfortunately, it changed from impossible to more impossible." Samuel Okafor was a genetic archaeologist from the Lunar Academy, a patient man whose calm voice concealed an almost aggressive devotion to precision. He enlarged the molecular reconstruction above the central table. "The sample contains fragments from at least 14 organisms," he explained. "Most are microbial. 3 are native to extinct Orison ecosystems. 2 are unidentified. 1 is human. Modern contamination? No preservatives, no recent cellular material, no fabrication residue. The fragments were mineralized inside the dust before the glass formed. Age? The dust layer is approximately 160,000 years old." Varga stared at the rotating chain of genetic markers. Modern humans had existed on Earth at that time. Small populations had hunted, migrated, buried their dead, and painted symbols on stone. They had not crossed interstellar space. At least, that was what every museum, academy, and archive in the galaxy agreed upon. "How close is the match?" she asked. Okafor folded his arms. "Closer than it should be. It is unquestionably human, but several regions do not correspond to any population currently known. There are additional repair sequences in the cellular replication genes. Small changes. Deliberate changes, I think. Engineered? Possibly." Varga studied the display in silence. 8 years earlier, she had discovered the first anomalous object in the Orison system. It was a ring of ceramic material drifting beyond the outermost moon, scarred by impacts and almost invisible to conventional sensors. The ring's interior carried grooves arranged in groups of 10. The Xenoarchive classified it as an unfinished component from a forgotten mining operation. 2 years later, Varga's team located 9 identical rings in neighboring systems. Each one pointed toward Orison. She had spent half her career asking why. Now the dead world waited beneath her feet. A tone sounded across the laboratory. Chief Engineer Matteo Ren appeared on the wall display, his helmet clipped to his suit. "Director, the surface team is ready. We have the drill positioned over the void. Depth, 9.3 kilometers. Stability? The glass layer is dense but predictable. Beneath that, we have compressed sediment, then a metallic shell. No cavities until the main chamber. And the Xenoarchive? Still overhead, still sending warnings." Varga looked toward Okafor. He gave a slight nod. "Begin drilling," she ordered. Outside, the excavation machine unfolded beneath Orison's violet sky. It was called Daedalus, though it resembled no creature from human myth. Its 6 articulated legs gripped the black glass while a cylindrical bore assembly lowered from its central frame. Superconductive coils brightened around the drill head. The machine did not cut the surface mechanically. It shaped gravity into a narrow rotating field and pulled matter upward one atomized layer at a time. The first meter disappeared, then the next. Dust rose through containment tubes and entered sealed storage chambers aboard the Wayfarer's lantern. For 11 hours, Daedalus descended. At 3 kilometers, it passed through the glass. At 7, it encountered compacted minerals that had once been an ocean floor. At 9, the drill stopped. Matteo Ren stood beside the machine's control station and watched a perfect surface appear beneath the excavated stone. It was pale metal, uncorroded and without seams. "Director," he said over the expedition channel, "we have contact." Varga's reply came immediately. "Composition? Unknown. Spectrometer cannot penetrate it. Try acoustic mapping." Ren activated the pulse array. A low vibration passed through the buried structure. The returning data formed a rough image above his wrist. The shell extended beyond the excavation shaft in every direction. Ren increased the scan radius. The image expanded. His breathing slowed. "This is not a chamber," he said. "What is it?" "I do not know yet." The scan reached 50 kilometers, then 100. The curvature remained consistent. Ren looked across the black plain, toward the distant stone pillars. Whatever lay below them was not a building. It was the size of a city. Aboard the immutable record, Kel Varun watched the same data through instruments far more advanced than the humans possessed. The buried structure was 140 kilometers long. Its upper hull lay beneath 9 kilometers of planetary material. Geological analysis indicated that the world's crust had been liquefied during an ancient catastrophe, burying the object beneath molten rock and ocean sediment. The black glass plane above it had formed when a directed energy discharge struck the surface. The vessel, if it was a vessel, had survived. Meryl Sen stood beside the Archivist Prime. "The humans are requesting joint observation status," she said. "Denied. They have also transmitted their genetic findings." Kel Varun did not answer. Meral Sen hesitated before continuing. "The markers appear valid. Appearances are not authentication. 3 independent laboratories aboard our vessel confirmed them." Kel Varun turned slowly. "Why was I not informed?" "You ordered all human claims placed under contamination review. The laboratories completed that review. They found no contamination. The gallery seemed suddenly too small." Kel Varun looked down at Orison. For 160,000 years, the buried object had remained silent. Now its pulse continued, every 87 seconds, precise and patient. There were explanations. An extinct species could have abducted early humans from Earth. A later civilization could have planted modified human remains beneath the glass. The entire site could be an elaborate fabrication, but every alternative required evidence. Kel Varun realized with growing discomfort that he was no longer evaluating explanations by their support. He was evaluating them by how little they threatened the archive. "Open communication with Director Varga," he said. The human appeared before him moments later. "You may continue," Kel Varun told her. Under Xenoarchive supervision, Varga's expression did not change. "We welcome your observers. This does not constitute acceptance of human association with the site. Of course, if evidence of manipulation appears, the excavation will end." "Agreed." Kel Varun watched her carefully. "You seem unsurprised by the scale of the structure." Varga looked away for half a second, toward the geological image. "I am surprised, Archivist Prime, but not frightened?" "Not yet." "What would frighten you?" Her eyes returned to him. "Finding out why someone buried it." The first opening appeared 18 hours later. The pale hull resisted lasers, plasma cutters, molecular separation fields, and every chemical solvent the expedition possessed. Even the Xenoarchive's disassembly tools failed to leave a mark. Then Dr. Okafor noticed that the 87-second pulse changed whenever a human approached the exposed surface. The interval shortened. When Varga placed her palm against the metal, the next pulse came after 4 seconds. A line appeared beneath her hand. Matteo Ren stepped backward as the hull divided without sound. Air rushed upward from the darkness. The expedition team froze. Atmospheric sensors activated. Pressure rose within the shaft as gases escaped from the buried vessel. Nitrogen, oxygen, trace argon. "Breathable," Ren said. "After 160,000 years?" Varga asked. "Breathable is not the same as safe." She turned toward the waiting team. "Full seals, no exceptions." The opening widened into an oval passage 3 meters high. Light emerged from within. Not emergency red, not alien ultraviolet, not the shifting bioluminescence used by Athari vessels. Warm white light, human light. Varga entered first. Her boots touched a dark floor marked with thin silver lines. The passage extended ahead in a gentle curve. Its proportions were unmistakable. Handrails stood at human height. Doorways matched human shoulders. Control panels waited where human hands would naturally reach them. Behind her, Kel Varun's appointed observer, Archivist Daro Pell, moved through the opening on 4 careful legs. "Convergent design," he said. Varga looked back at him. "Perhaps." The first chamber contained rows of empty frames. At first, Ren mistook them for storage racks. Then the lights brightened, and shapes appeared within them. Holograms. Human figures stood in silence. Some wore layered uniforms. Others wore simple garments of fabric and metal. Their faces represented populations from across Earth, yet not exactly. Their features were familiar, but blended in patterns that modern classifications could not easily separate. Children stood beside adults. Workers stood beside soldiers. At the chamber's center, a woman held a small instrument against her chest, while a man rested one hand on her shoulder. No image moved. No recording played. It was a memorial. Daro Pell approached the nearest figure and scanned it. 163,000 years, he whispered. Kel Varun heard the words through the observer feed. He felt the archive's conclusion begin to fracture. The expedition continued. Every corridor offered another contradiction. The walls displayed maps containing recognizable stars, though their positions were ancient. Storage chambers held tools shaped for human hands. Medical stations contained genetic templates linked to Homo sapiens. Sleeping quarters included beds, personal compartments, and carved symbols that resembled forms found in prehistoric human art. But there were differences. The technology exceeded anything modern humanity could build. The vessel used no central reactor. Energy moved through its hull as though the metal itself stored sunlight. Gravity remained stable without detectable generators. Damaged systems repaired themselves when exposed to heat. Doors recognized human biology, despite the immense passage of time. The ship was not merely ancient. It belonged to a civilization beyond the modern age. After 14 hours, the team reached a circular chamber sealed behind a transparent barrier. Inside stood a model of the galaxy. Thousands of stars glowed above a black floor. Lines connected them in branching networks. Human expedition markers filled the Orion Arm, crossed the galactic center, and continued toward regions still unexplored by contemporary civilizations. Darrow Pell stopped at the threshold. "Impossible," he said. No one answered. The holographic map rotated. 380 systems brightened. Each carried the same symbol, a circle divided by a rising line. Varga had seen it before. The ceramic rings. They were not navigation markers pointing toward Orison. They were fragments of a transportation network. Wren moved closer to the barrier. "Director, look at the outer arm." A cluster of red lights pulsed beyond the ancient human systems. They spread inward. Where they touched the network, stars went dark. The map was not showing expansion. It was showing retreat. Varga studied the dates displayed beside the galactic model. The notation was unfamiliar, but the numerical structure was clear. Each sequence decreased as the red region advanced. "This ship was fleeing," she said. Darrow Pell turned toward her. "From what?" the chamber answered. A projection appeared above the galactic map. A human man stood before them, tall and gray-haired, wearing a black uniform marked with the divided circle. His face carried exhaustion so profound that even across 160,000 years it seemed immediate. His lips moved. No sound emerged. Then the ship adjusted. Words formed inside every helmet, translated by direct neural induction. The man identified himself as Admiral Lucian Vale, commander of the continuance vessel Asterion. Elena Varga forgot to breathe. The projection explained that Asterion carried the final archive of the Helian Commonwealth, a human civilization spanning 380 inhabited systems. It had endured for more than 4,000 years. It had raised cities beneath alien suns, redirected comets, healed damaged worlds, and opened passages between stars. Then it had encountered something beyond the outer arm. The projection called it the Null. Not an empire, not a species. A process. The Null moved between galaxies, reducing complex systems into uniform matter. It dismantled machines, erased biological variation, and silenced every signal it touched. It did not conquer civilizations, it simplified them. The Commonwealth fought for 800 years. It lost 290 systems. Its scientists discovered that the Null followed advanced energy signatures and information density. Every inhabited planet, every archive, every network, and every human mind made the civilization easier to find. Survival required an unthinkable decision. Humanity abandoned its empire. The Commonwealth dismantled its gates, erased its beacons, evacuated surviving populations, and returned to the world where the species had begun, Earth. But Earth could not conceal billions of citizens or the technology of a stellar age. So the Commonwealth divided itself. Most humans entered biological restoration programs. Their engineered longevity, neural interfaces, and inherited memory systems were removed over generations. Machines dismantled cities and carried their materials beneath oceans and continents. Orbital structures were sent into the sun. Colonies were emptied. Records were condensed into vessels like Asterion and hidden on dead worlds. Humanity did not fall into barbarism through defeat. It chose to become primitive. A species reduced itself to scattered tribes so completely that even its descendants would not know what had been sacrificed. The Null searched the region. It found no empire, only a young biological species on an unremarkable world. The projection of Admiral Vale looked across the chamber as though he could see the people who would one day stand there. His final message was not addressed to the Commonwealth. It was addressed to humanity's descendants. The translation entered their minds. "If you are hearing this," Admiral Vale said, "then you survived long enough to become curious again. We took your inheritance from you because knowledge was a beacon and power was a trail. We left you no monuments on Earth because monuments can be found. We left you no machines because machines can be followed. We left only yourselves." The projection paused. Varga saw grief in the ancient man's eyes. "You may judge us for what we erased," he continued. "You may hate us for the darkness we placed between your age and ours. But understand this. We did not surrender the future. We carried it into hiding inside ordinary human lives. The galactic map changed. Earth appeared at its center. Lines spread across the planet, not as cities or roads, but as patterns within human DNA. The old Commonwealth had hidden fragments of knowledge in the species itself. Not memories, instincts, the tendency to search beyond the horizon, the urge to build tools, the ability to cooperate in vast numbers, the refusal to accept permanent limits. Humanity had not rebuilt civilization by accident. It had been designed to return. The projection faded. No one in the chamber spoke. Aboard the immutable record, Kel Varun stood surrounded by every surviving piece of certainty he had once possessed. The evidence was complete: genetic continuity, material dating, historical record, technological context, independent verification. The Xenoarchive's own standards permitted only one conclusion. Humanity had possessed an ancient interstellar civilization, not a small kingdom, not an isolated colony, an empire in all but name, older than most nations represented in the Galactic Assembly. Kel Varun closed his eyes. For decades, he had told humans their myths were inventions. Now he understood that myths were what remained when a civilization erased the roads back to its own memory. Meryl Sen stood several paces away. "Archivist Prime," she said carefully, "the Assembly is requesting confirmation." "Not yet. The evidence is already being transmitted by the human expedition." "Not yet," Kel Varun repeated. He walked toward the central console. A public authentication from the Xenoarchive would alter every treaty involving humanity. Ancient civilizations possessed inheritance rights under galactic law. If the Commonwealth's territory could be demonstrated, human claims might extend across hundreds of systems now occupied by other species. Fear would follow, then anger, then war. Kel Varun understood why institutions sometimes resisted truth. Truth had consequences. But the purpose of the archive had never been comfort. "Open a channel to Orison," he ordered. Director Varga appeared. She looked older than she had 2 days earlier. Kel Varun lowered his head. It was an Ithari gesture of formal accountability, performed so rarely that Meryl Sen drew a quiet breath. "The Xenoarchive's conclusion regarding human antiquity was incorrect," he said. "I was responsible for that conclusion." Varga watched him in silence. "The archive will authenticate Asterion as a human vessel constructed approximately 163,000 years ago. We will recognize the Helian Commonwealth as a precursor civilization with direct biological continuity to modern humanity. Thank you, Archivist Prime. Do not thank me. Accuracy delayed is not generosity." Varga's expression softened slightly. "What happens now?" Kel Varun looked toward the red region on the ancient map. "Now we determine whether the thing your ancestors feared is still coming." As if awakened by the words, Asterion pulsed. Not once. Not after 87 seconds. Continuously. Lights changed throughout the buried vessel. Warm corridors darkened to amber. Sealed doors opened. The galactic map expanded beyond the chamber until its stars filled the air around Varga's team. The red region moved. Samuel Okafor stared upward. "The map is receiving current data," he said. "From where?" Wren asked. "The ceramic rings," Varga realized. They had survived across multiple systems as passive sensors, waiting for signs of the null. New points appeared beyond the galactic rim. Hundreds, then thousands. They formed a vast arc moving inward. The null had crossed the darkness between galaxies. It was approaching again. The first estimate reached the immutable record seconds later. 300 years until contact, perhaps less. For the Ithari, 3 centuries represented the span of a single mature life. For the galaxy, it was almost nothing. Panic traveled faster than the official report. Within 6 hours, military fleets departed border systems. Governments sealed communication networks. Markets failed across 400 worlds. 3 civilizations accused humanity of awakening the threat. 2 demanded Orison be destroyed before Asterion could transmit further. The Galactic Assembly summoned an emergency session. Its chamber occupied the interior of a hollow moon, where representatives of 62 civilizations gathered beneath a dome showing the stars in real time. Holographic delegations filled the lower terraces. Warships waited outside. Director Elena Varga attended through transmission from Asterion. Quell Varun stood physically before the central tribunal. The accusations began immediately. Speaker Jorath of the Belisar Dominion demanded to know why humanity had concealed the existence of the Commonwealth. Varga answered that modern humanity could not conceal knowledge it did not possess. Marshal Austin of the Triune Fleet argued that ancient human territory could no longer be recognized without destabilizing inhabited systems. Varga replied that no territorial claims had been made. Ambassador Selkie of the Namar Collective asked the question beneath every other question: what weapons did the Commonwealth leave behind? Varga looked toward the ancient chamber around her. We have found no weapons. Disbelief rippled across the assembly. A civilization spanning hundreds of systems had fought the Null for 8 centuries. It must have possessed arsenals beyond imagination. Quell Varun watched Varga's face. She was not withholding information. She was confused. Then Matteo Ren entered the edge of her transmission. "Director," he said, "we found another chamber." The assembly fell silent. Varga turned. "What is inside?" "Nothing," Ren replied. "That is the problem." The newly opened chamber extended for 20 kilometers beneath Asterion's central spine. Its walls contained millions of empty sockets, each large enough to hold a human hand. At its center stood a single console. No controls appeared until Varga approached. Then words formed across its surface. Continuance population absent. Archive integrity confirmed. Threat recurrence confirmed. Descendant authorization required. Varga placed her hand on the console. The ship asked one question: had humanity returned to the stars alone? Varga looked toward the assembly transmission. 62 civilizations watched her from across the galaxy. "No," she answered. The chamber began to move. The empty sockets opened. From each one emerged a thread of silver material thinner than hair. The threads crossed the chamber, joined, separated, and formed branching shapes. Within seconds, a vast lattice filled the space. Samuel Okafor studied the energy readings. "This is not a weapons bay," he said. "What is it?" Quell Varun asked through the transmission. Varga understood first. A factory. Asterion had not preserved an ancient fleet. It had preserved the means to build one. But the designs appearing above the console were not warships. They were networks of autonomous craft, each no larger than a human shuttle. They carried no cannons, no missiles, and no defensive armor. Their purpose was encoded in diagrams showing molecular fields, gravitational harmonics, and recursive information barriers. The Commonwealth had learned something during its final years. The Null could not distinguish between complexity and chaos. It followed ordered concentrations of energy and information. A sufficiently vast field of cooperating but independently changing signals could overwhelm its targeting process. The ancient humans had designed a defense based not on destruction, but diversity. Billions of small machines, each altering its behavior in response to every other machine, could create a moving shield of unpredictability around the galaxy. But the Commonwealth had lacked the industrial capacity to construct it before retreat became necessary. Asterion contained the design. Modern humanity could not build it alone. No civilization could. The system required materials from hundreds of worlds, biological computation from species with radically different minds, gravitational engineering possessed by the Athari, stellar shaping known only to the Belisar, and communication methods developed by the Namar. The ancient defense had waited for a galaxy capable of cooperation. Admiral Vale's projection returned. This time, his message addressed not humanity, but whoever stood beside it. "If our descendants found friends," he said, "then the Commonwealth's greatest hope has survived. We learned too late that no empire, however wide, contains enough ways of thinking to resist the end of thought itself. The defense before you cannot be built by one species. That is its purpose." The assembly watched in silence. The ancient human looked tired, but for the first time, he also looked hopeful. "We preserved humanity by making it small. You will preserve the galaxy by becoming greater together." The transmission ended. For several seconds, the vast chamber held no sound. Then Quell Varun stepped into the central circle. "The Xenoarchive spent 24,000 years protecting the past," he said. "Today, the past has given us an obligation to the future. The Athari will provide every gravitational foundry under archive authority. Ambassador Selkie rose. The Namar Collective will provide communication cores. Marshal Austin remained seated for a long moment. Then the old Belisar commander struck one fist against his armored chest. The Triune Fleet will open its stellar forges. One by one, the civilizations answered. Not all from courage. Some acted from fear. Others from pride, necessity, or the simple understanding that isolation offered no survival. Their motives did not need to be pure. They only needed to align. Within 10 years, the first lattice craft emerged from the shipyards of Luna. Within 50, factories operated in 112 systems. Within a century, millions of vessels moved between the stars, each carrying components created by dozens of species. Human engineers worked beside Athari archivists. Belisar forge masters shared techniques once guarded as military secrets. Namar thought weavers taught machines to vary without losing cooperation. The galaxy changed while preparing to survive. Borders became less important than supply lines. Translation systems improved. Old enemies learned each other's working songs. The Xenoarchive revised its human galleries. Quell Varun refused to hide the institution's error. The original conclusion remained displayed beside the evidence that disproved it. Beneath the record, he added a simple statement. Certainty is not the absence of doubt. It is the courage to yield when evidence arrives. He visited Orison one final time 289 years after the excavation began. The black glass plain no longer stood empty. A city had grown around the exposed hull of Asterion. Humans and aliens crossed its bridges beneath the violet sky. Children from 12 species studied the ancient memorial chamber. Above them, lattice craft departed in shining formations toward the galactic rim. Elena Varga had died more than 2 centuries earlier. A statue of her stood near the excavation shaft, not as a conqueror or founder, but as she had appeared on the first day, one hand pressed against the hull, while a line of light opened beneath her palm. Quell Varun stood before it with Miral Sen, now Archivist Prime in her own right. "Do you regret denying them?" she asked. "Every day," he replied. Miral Sen looked toward Asterion. "Yet if you had believed them without evidence, you would have betrayed the archive in another way." Quell Varun considered that. Perhaps. Above the city, the sky filled with moving lights. The completed defense now stretched across the galaxy's outer systems. Billions of machines shifted constantly, through patterns no central intelligence controlled. Every civilization contributed something unique. Every species added uncertainty the null could not simplify. Far beyond the rim, the ancient process encountered the first edge of the lattice. It adjusted. The lattice changed. It adjusted again. The galaxy changed faster. For 30 years, the contest unfolded in silence. Then the red signals on Asterion's map began to turn away. No planet burned. No fleet fired. No empire stood alone. The null, which had reduced civilizations across the darkness between galaxies, found itself facing a form of life it could not understand. Not unity through sameness, unity through difference. It withdrew. On the day the final red signal vanished, the bells of Orison rang in hundreds of musical systems. Across Earth, people gathered beneath open skies. On worlds whose names the Commonwealth had never known, children watched the stars and learned the story of the empire that erased itself so life might endure. The Xenoarchive had once declared that humanity possessed no ancient empire. The ruins had disagreed. They revealed roads beneath forgotten worlds, cities dismantled without graves, and ships that had waded through the rise and fall of younger species. They revealed an age when human hands had shaped hundreds of systems, but the ruins revealed something greater than dominion. Humanity's oldest achievement was not the empire it built, it was the future it surrendered everything to protect. The ancient humans had hidden their machines. They had buried their names. They had allowed history to forget them. Yet they left one treasure where no enemy could recognize it. A species that would rise again. A species that would search again. A species that, when the darkness returned, would not stand alone.